When the microphone went silent, Amy Winehouse's real voice was heard for the first time. 15,000 people. One stage. A microphone that stopped working in the middle of a song. And a moment that would change everything anyone thought they knew about Amy Winehouse. It was supposed to be just another concert. Another sold-out show. Another night where Amy would pour her soul into songs about heartbreak, addiction, and survival. But that night, in front of thousands of strangers, something broke. Not just the equipment. Something deeper. What happened next wasn't in any script. It wasn't rehearsed. It was raw, unfiltered, and so painfully human that even the people in the back rows could feel it in their chests. This is the story of the night Amy Winehouse stopped being a performer and became something else entirely. Something the world desperately needed to see. But before we get to that moment, you need to understand how it all started. Because what looked like a technical failure was actually the beginning of the most honest performance of her life. Subscribe now, because what's about to unfold will change the way you see not just Amy Winehouse, but the power of vulnerability itself. The O2 Arena in London was packed to capacity. Every seat filled. Every eye trained on the stage where Amy Winehouse was about to perform. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind you only get when an artist's reputation precedes them in every possible way. Amy had been through a lot by that point. The world knew it. The tabloids made sure of that. Her struggles with addiction, her turbulent relationships, her battles with fame, all of it was public knowledge. But to the 15,000 people in that arena, none of that mattered. They came to hear the voice. That voice that could break your heart and put it back together in the span of a single note. She walked on stage wearing a simple black dress, her signature beehive hair perfectly styled, her cat-eye makeup sharp as ever. The crowd erupted. Screaming, cheering, some people crying before she even sang a single word. Because for many of them, Amy Winehouse wasn't just a singer. She was proof that broken things could still be beautiful. The band started playing. The first notes of Back to Black filled the arena. Amy lifted the microphone to her lips and began to sing. Her voice, that deep, soulful, aching voice, wrapped around every person in the room like a blanket made of sadness and strength. But then, halfway through the second verse, something happened. The microphone cut out. No sound. Just Amy's lips moving, the band still playing, and 15,000 people suddenly holding their breath. At first, people thought it was intentional. Some kind of artistic choice. But then they saw her face. The confusion. The frustration. The realization that something had gone terribly wrong. The band kept playing, unaware at first. Amy tapped the microphone. Nothing. She looked toward the sound engineer offstage, her eyes wide with panic. Still nothing. And then, Amy Winehouse did something no one expected. She stopped. She didn't walk off stage. She didn't throw the microphone in frustration. She didn't storm away like the tabloids would have loved to report. She just stood there. In the middle of the stage. Under the lights. In front of 15,000 people. And she was completely, utterly silent. The band noticed. One by one, the instruments stopped. The guitarist looked over at her. The drummer lowered his sticks. The entire arena fell into a silence so profound you could hear people breathing. Amy lowered the dead microphone. Her hand was shaking. And then something extraordinary happened. From somewhere in the crowd, a voice started singing. A woman's voice. Not loud. Not trying to be a star. Just singing the words Amy couldn't finish. We only said goodbye with words, I died 100 times. Amy's head snapped up. She looked into the crowd, searching for the voice. And then another voice joined. And another. Row by row, section by section, the entire arena started singing. 15,000 people. No microphone. No amplification. Just voices. Raw, unpolished, real voices singing Amy Winehouse's song back to her. Amy stood frozen at first. Then her hand went to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. Because for the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, she wasn't performing for them. They were performing for her. But here's the part no one expected. The part that changed everything. Amy dropped the microphone. It fell to the stage with a dull thud. She walked to the edge of the platform, as close to the crowd as she could get without falling off. And she started singing with them. No amplification. No equipment. Just her voice, raw and unfiltered, mixing with 15,000 others. The cameras caught it. The entire moment. Amy Winehouse, one of the most famous voices in the world, singing without a microphone in an arena built for sound systems and spectacle. Her voice was quieter than it had ever been on any recording. But somehow, it was louder than anything she'd ever sung. People in the front rows could see her face clearly. The tears streaming down her cheeks. The way her hands were trembling. The absolute vulnerability of a woman who had spent years building walls around herself, now standing completely exposed. A security guard later said he'd never seen anything like it. He'd worked hundreds of concerts. He'd seen technical failures before. Artists always handled them the same way. Wait for the fix. Make a joke. Fill the time. Move on. But Amy didn't move on. She leaned into it. She made the failure into something sacred. The song ended. The crowd was still singing, even after the last note should have faded. Amy stood there, crying openly now, her hands pressed to her chest like she was trying to hold her heart inside her body. A woman in the third row, a cancer patient who had saved for months to afford the ticket, would later say it was the first time she'd felt truly seen in years. Not as a sick person. Not as someone to pity. But as someone whose voice mattered. Whose presence mattered. Subscribe and comment right now because what Amy did next will stay with you forever. The arena staff were scrambling backstage. They had the microphone fixed. A technician was waving frantically from the wings, trying to get Amy's attention. They could continue the show. Everything could go back to normal. But Amy didn't move toward the microphone. Instead, she sat down. Right there on the edge of the stage. Her legs dangling over the side. Her dress pooling around her. And she gestured for the crowd to be quiet. It took a moment. 15,000 people don't go silent quickly. But eventually, the arena fell into a hush. Amy looked out at the sea of faces, illuminated by phone screens and the ambient stage lights. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice, without amplification, carried just far enough for the first few rows to hear. They repeated it to the people behind them. A human chain of whispers spreading her words through the crowd. "I'm sorry I'm such a mess," she continued. "I'm sorry I'm not perfect. I'm sorry I can't always be what you need me to be." People in the crowd started shaking their heads. Some were crying. A man in the balcony would later tell reporters he felt like Amy was apologizing directly to him, even though they'd never met. "But you," Amy's voice cracked. "You just gave me something I didn't know I needed. You reminded me why I do this. Not for the charts. Not for the awards. Not for any of that. For this. For moments where we're all just human. Together." She stood up then. Slowly. The technician handed her a working microphone. She took it, but she didn't immediately start singing. Instead, she did something that would become legendary in the stories people told about that night. She invited someone from the crowd onto the stage. Not a celebrity. Not a plant. Just someone random. A young woman in the front row who had been sobbing through the entire moment. Amy pointed at her, gestured for security to help her up. The woman, later identified as Sarah Mitchell, a 23-year-old teacher from Manchester, climbed onto the stage in complete shock. Amy took her hand. "What's your name?" Amy asked, holding the microphone between them. "Sarah," the woman managed to say, her voice shaking so badly the word was barely comprehensible. "Sarah," Amy repeated, smiling through her tears. "Sarah, why are you here tonight?" Sarah looked at the crowd, then back at Amy. "Because your music saved my life," she said simply. "When I wanted to give up, your songs reminded me I wasn't alone." Amy closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were filled with something that looked like pain and gratitude mixed together. "Then let's sing together," she said. "Because you just reminded me I'm not alone either." What happened next was captured on hundreds of phones, uploaded to the internet, and watched millions of times. But no recording could fully capture what it felt like to be there. Amy and Sarah sang, "Love is a losing game," together. Amy's professional, trained voice and Sarah's ordinary, imperfect one blending into something that transcended music. The crowd joined in, quieter this time, like they understood they were witnessing something holy. When the song ended, Amy hugged Sarah. Not a quick, polite hug. A real one. The kind of embrace you give someone when you're both drowning and you've just found something to hold on to. Sarah whispered something in Amy's ear. No microphone caught it. No camera angle captured her lips moving. But Amy nodded. And whatever Sarah said, it made Amy laugh. A real laugh. The kind that transforms a face, that makes you look younger, lighter. Security helped Sarah back to her seat. Amy watched her go, then turned back to the crowd. "Thank you," she said into the microphone. "Thank you for seeing me. Not the person the papers write about. Not the mess they want me to be. Just me." The concert continued. Amy sang the rest of her set list. Every song was different after that moment. More vulnerable. More honest. Like something had been unlocked inside her that couldn't be closed again. But the story doesn't end there. After the concert, Amy did something she rarely did. She stayed. Usually, she'd leave immediately, avoiding the crowds, the press, the chaos. But that night, she waited by the stage door. For over an hour, she met fans. Took photos. Signed autographs. Listened to their stories. Sarah Mitchell came back. They talked for 20 minutes. About music. About struggle. About survival. Amy gave Sarah her guitar pick, the one she'd used on stage that night. She wrote a message on it in Sharpie. "Your voice matters, Amy." Sarah would keep that pick in a frame. When Amy Winehouse died 2 years later, Sarah would look at it and remember the night Amy proved that brokenness isn't the opposite of beauty. It's often the source of it. The video of that night went viral. Millions of views. Hundreds of thousands of comments. People from all over the world sharing their own stories of struggling, of feeling broken, of finding strength in Amy's music. But more than that, something shifted in how people talked about Amy. For so long, the narrative had been about her problems, her addictions, her failures. After that night, people started talking about her humanity. Her capacity for connection. Her ability to turn disaster into grace. Music critics would later call it the most authentic performance of Amy Winehouse's career. The night she stopped trying to be perfect and started being real. But for the 15,000 people in the O2 Arena that night, it was simpler than that. It was the night they realized that the voice they'd been listening to for years wasn't just Amy's. It was theirs too. All of their voices, singing about pain and love and survival. Together. Amy Winehouse's microphone failed that night. But in its silence, something louder emerged. The sound of human connection. The sound of understanding that we're all broken. And that maybe that's exactly what makes us beautiful. The guitar pick Sarah received that night still exists. After Amy's death, Sarah loaned it to a museum exhibition about Amy's life. Thousands of people stood in front of that small piece of plastic with Amy's handwriting on it. Many of them cried. Because they understood what it represented. It wasn't just a souvenir. It was proof that Amy Winehouse, for all her struggles, knew something fundamental about being human. That we need each other. That our voices matter. That sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is stop performing and start connecting. In the years since Amy's death, that concert has taken on an almost mythical quality. People who weren't there claim they were. Bootleg recordings circulate online, though the audio quality is poor because no professional equipment captured that middle section when the microphone failed. But maybe that's fitting. Maybe some moments aren't meant to be preserved in perfect clarity. Maybe they're meant to live in memory, in the stories we tell, in the way they change us. Sarah Mitchell became a music teacher. She tells her students about that night. About how Amy Winehouse taught her that mistakes can become moments of grace. That failure can become communion. That sometimes the best thing you can do is drop the microphone and just be human. The O2 Arena staff sometimes talk about it. The night the equipment failed and everything went right. They say you can still feel something in that space. A kind of lingering warmth. The ghost of 15,000 voices singing together in the dark. Amy's family, in interviews after her death, mentioned that concert. They said she called them afterward crying. But for once, they were happy tears. That microphone failure wasn't a disaster. It was a gift. A moment when the armor cracked and the real Amy Winehouse shone through. Not the troubled star. Not the tabloid headline. Just a woman who understood pain, who knew what it meant to struggle, and who used her voice, with or without a microphone, to remind us that we're all in this together. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to keep these moments alive. And remember, sometimes our greatest moments come not when everything works perfectly, but when everything falls apart, and we choose to stay anyway. The guitar pick still exists. Amy's handwriting still visible. Your voice matters. It always did. It always will.